It is 7 p.m. Time to call the Tuesday, January 24th meeting of the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission to order. Will staff please confirm the presence of the quorum?
Sorry. Kristen Berkman.
Here.
Matthew Deck.
Matthew will not be attending tonight virtually or in person.
Robert Working.
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
Jenny Keller.
Here.
Andre Maui.
Here.
Victor McCarty.
Here.
Dave Schmitz.
Here.
Cindy Spoljack.
Also not virtual or in person. So we have a quorum. First item of business to approve our minutes of the January 17th meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
It's Kelleher.
Motion by Jenny Kelleher, seconded by Dave Schmitz. Will staff please call the roll?
Kristen Berkman.
Yes.
Robert Horke.
Yes?
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Jenny Keller.
Yes.
Andre Maui.
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
Dave Schmitz.
Yes. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Will staff please review the rules of procedure for tonight's meeting, which includes no public hearings, but consent agenda and a workshop.
Yes, so the general procedures for workshop meetings. The department will introduce the petition stating when the item was last before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission and petitioner will then discuss changes made to the ordinance using the issue list as a guide, or in this scenario, we will just briefly recap the previous workshop. Once the discussion is finished, the department will summarize the final changes that are expected to be made prior to the petition returning for a recommendation. General rules of conduct, please do not disturb the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, then we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time. If you must answer them, then please quietly exit the room. We would like to remind those attending virtually to please mute your microphone when not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. First item is approval of the consent agenda, which includes 2 items. Is there a motion to approve these 2 consent agenda items?
Quick question, because I know I'm going to get this question myself. Do we know what kind of coffee shop or just that it's a coffee shop?
I believe it's a Starbucks.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Victor McCarty, seconded by Dave Schmitz. Will staff please call the roll?
Kristen Berkman.
Yes.
Matthew Dick.
That's
Absolutely.
Park.
Robert Horke.
Yes?
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Jenny Keller.
Yes.
Andre Maui.
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
And Dave Schmitz.
Yes. Consent agenda is approved. We move on to our main reason for being here tonight, the workshop item of Woods Robinson Briggs PUD Amendment 2, petition number 2207-PB-13. Staff will do their intro and then the petitioner can present as well.
Okay, we have all the exhibits pulled up. So, good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. The item before you tonight is a workshop discussion opportunity for the proposed Woods Robinson Briggs PUD amendment. This item was last before the Advisory Plan Commission meeting in late December at the second meeting of the December schedule. Like I mentioned, tonight is a workshop discussion opportunity. The main focus of this evening's discussion will be mostly around proposed ordinance language. So the staff report really summarizes everything that's been accomplished between the previous meeting and tonight. But I'll go ahead and just briefly outline a few items. As we're all familiar at this point, part of this proposed amendment would add 4.5 acres of real estate. There has been the addition of one definition to the amendment, which is a reception/event center that has now been defined in the ordinance. Also, as we're familiar at this point, the district plan and the concept plan will both be replaced as part of this amendment. The character exhibits have also been updated since the previous meeting with a few new images per prior feedback. There's been some architectural language added for the commercial recreation facility and the church facility. That's mostly around materials. That was also discussed at the previous meeting. This is a recommended addition to this amendment language. And then really a lot of the language that you're going to see tonight is centered around the District 1 general regulations. This is where items such as the water feature, the pedestrian promenade, those major site elements, those will be discussed in the District 1 general regulations. And then lastly, the District 2 park area, there will be language that the amendment covers for the playground and the location and some other design language of that nature. So that's a very brief, broad overview. That concludes the staff introduction at this time. We'll turn it over to the petitioner to provide an update if you wish to do so at this time. And then we welcome discussion based on all the exhibits that have been attached to the agenda. So that's all I have, and I'll turn it over to the petitioner.
So yes, a lot of things, good discussions been happening with staff, since our last get together. Also meet with the Woods family representative, Joe Morris, Matt Skelton here tonight to address any specific questions on the park, but I think, and he'll explain the current exhibit and that, but I think we're there. Staff has worked pretty well on cleaning up some language and so forth. You brought up materials, and before we get too far from that, we talked about the wood being used in the church, kind of the wood theme, stone theme. But I brought some materials that I want to use on my racket center. I just want to make sure you guys see it, and then it's defined in the UDO or however we defaulted to it. Because, as far as the masonry requirement. So I want to pull this out and show it to you real quick, and then we'll move over, take care of the park with these guys. And then there's a couple language items I want to address. But real quick, this technology I looked at years ago for the Family Entertainment Center. And what it is a metal. This side looks like, it can look like anything, smooth, precast, whatever. 4 inches insulation, but hard inside, which is perfect for our racket center. But now they can make these in 50-foot panels. Years ago, they were 4x8 sheets, and people, you'll see them when they hung them like this or like that, and you see a little crack down there like a precast panel when you put it together. But now with 50 feet potential, I could come in with a masonry block wall, say 10 feet up, then stack 34, 36 footers on top of it, and I got my 40-foot clearance. But I also got my insulation, and now I don't have to do anything on the inside. Because if you think about it, in a racket court, there's nothing to do on the inside walls, generally other than hang nets. So that's why I brought it. I didn't know, this is, remember we talked about this year, it's called a metal architectural panel with a masonry look.
Yeah, I think we've even defined it in the UDO.
I just want to make sure, A, everybody saw it, and B, is it included in my usable materials?
Birch, can you stand next to staff or something? Because I know Andre and I can't see what you're presenting.
Cameras.
Cameras there.
The camera's on top of the screen.
Okay. If it's not possible, that's okay. I just thought, thank you.
So this side can look like anything, a brick wall or brick, you know, a precast panel or how it is. And it has 4 inches of insulation. And then on the inside, it's hard, which is perfect for the racket area. Because now all I have to do is put a panel up, you know, put up my steel, put the panel on top of masonry block. We had it approved at the trails years ago, but I passed on it because they were smaller sheets, but now they can make 50 footers. So if you can imagine a crane installing 50-foot tongue and groove, it really cuts down the cost.
Thanks, Bert. So Bert, are you asking staff, is that permitted in the UDO? Is that the question for Kevin?
Yes, the question is that if I had it, because I have the normal masonry requirement, and we were looking at precast, and the first round of bids came in so darn high, I was looking for alternatives, and I found this in my closet, and I said I was gonna bring it back. You guys want to see it?
So Kevin, I guess that's a question for what he's asking is that permitted?
Yeah, I'm looking.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't do that.
50 feet long, how wide?
I think 50 inches.
Just a little over 4 feet.
So, well, yeah, 4 foot by. They may be wider the higher they go. I don't know, but they just said they. So you see the insulated. So,
Something that's good on a truck.
did you see it, Jenny?
Yeah, I can. Thank you very much. I wanted Andre to see it as much as anything because he knows more about this stuff than I do.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with what this type of structural insulated panel would look like. I just want to make sure. So Birch, that is not in the language right now, as I understand. You'd have to add that because right now it specifically says tilt-up concrete, right?
I think so. I think there's some default language in the absence of it.
Yeah, so unless it's, I just checked at the UDO level. It's interesting. It's a term that we've defined because folks have wanted to use it. So we've defined it, but we have not listed it anywhere necessarily as a permitted material. So it is in our definitions as architectural insulated panel. So I think it could be as simple as including it as a permitted material in your ordinance. As long as we match up the term, we've already defined it.
Yeah.
But it would need to be listed. It's not permitted by right.
So it was in the UDO.
Well, the term is in the UDO. We just don't use it anywhere.
So what it is the 32 overlay applies and it's not in that. And then you wanted to modify it to tilt up panels in lieu of masonry. So this would not be included unless it were specifically added. Is that correct, Kevin?
I'm sorry, I was talking.
Oh, sorry. Can you say that again?
Oh, no. I said that in the ordinance, in this PUD ordinance, it says that the 32 overlay shall apply with the following exceptions. And the exceptions are tilt-up panels instead of masonry. And so this would not be permitted unless it were specifically added as an exception to the 32 overlay.
That makes sense. Yes.
Right. I
Yes.
think,
That's how
yes.
it would be.
Okay.
I agree with
Agreed.
that.
So I guess, Jenny, my request is that, you know, tilt up right now is running 5 to 6 months. And these panels can be made in 60 to 90 days, but they're 30% cheaper. When you look at, once I do the tilt up, I still have to come out on the inside and do finished wall work. And in lieu of that, I already have my insulation. It has the masonry look, but my finished wall on the sides, I'm done. I don't have to do anything.
And I get that. I can't make a decision on that because I really don't know enough about these materials. And I would think that Westfield Building Code might want to look at it and give us a recommendation because I have no idea. It's not my area of expertise to know whether it's good or bad. That's kind of why I was leaning on Andre. I'm not necessarily against it or for it. I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, and my issue was just to make sure, because as has already been discussed, I think it would have to be added. I don't think it's covered in the language right now because it says tilt-up concrete. I'm okay with it particularly because, Bert, you were talking about doing it above a masonry base, like above 10 feet.
Yeah.
And I think it should be written in that way. Whereas tilt-up concrete is pretty robust all the way down to grade. It's not like EFS, it's not going to show traffic like that, but it's somewhere in between, the metal wall panels. And I don't think it would be a limitation for you because I think you want to have the masonry down at the playing level anyway. So I'd like to see it written where it's above, if it's 8 feet or 10 feet or something like that. And then I wanted to make sure that when you go to that, it still has the language about, and I scrolled to a different page. It was in that same section about making sure that you still have the same variations in color and texture and things like that. That's all written well for when it was tilt-up concrete. I think that just needs to stay in there with the new version that allows this panel.
Well, and that's what I like about these panels, the color schemes. They had like 20 different colors on their flat, on their samples. Plus you can do an EFS look, which I know we don't want, or we can do a flat, or we can actually do they can make it look like brick, which I don't think we want either. But I was thinking the opportunity to use it and to have cool color breaks, would be, and the speed and the cost. And, I'm still trying to drive about $5 million out of the cost of this building.
So that would be under section 6 overlay districts, under 6.1. This is on page 3. Under the commercial recreational facility use buildings. It would remove the tilt-up concrete.
Well, I don't want to remove it. It's either use tilt-up or this, whichever.
Okay, so it could be an or this, and then leave the end of the sentence, which says contains multiple colors and textures.
Correct.
Yeah, currently the ordinance says may use tilt-up concrete in lieu of masonry, so we would just add the architectural insulated panels to be another permitted material.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration.
In that same section, I had another question related to that, where it talks about multiple colors, excuse me, and texturing similar to those seen in Exhibit L. And again, right now it's written for tilt-up concrete. That would be written for the architectural panels as well. Exhibit L has textures, colors, and a lot of different like punched openings and stuff to it as well. And there's not like a really long flat wall section. I don't think in any one of those big pictures on Exhibit L. Is that included in the intent? That's a question for Birch. And then for staff, is it enforceably written that way for whoever builds this, to where it wouldn't be just a flat wall panel with different colors on it, that it actually has more character like these exhibits show than just color?
So Andre, are you saying more architectural bump out or breaks, just actually,
Yeah, and I don't want to get down the path of where we go to, the rabbit hole of doing the design with you, and specifying what it is. But these exhibits all have, there's bump outs, there's breaks, there's windows, there's awnings, there's changes in depth, things like that. And yet the language, I think, it really only requires right now texture and color.
well,
Not
Wilson,
really
did
quite
we do something
commensurate.
on the glass and
Yeah, so
the entryway?
anything not specifically mentioned in, or is it this ordinance language here, the design of this building would be defaulting back to the State Highway 32 overlay standards, which requires the modulation, the offsets, bump outs, what have you, and the windows and those sorts of design elements. So that would be captured by the UDO standards. Does that answer your question on that?
It may, I thought I read that some of that went away in here, but maybe it didn't. I might be thinking of something else.
Yeah, there's been other PUDs where it has been removed or modified in some scenarios. But here, whatever language that you see here under overlay districts and then 32 overlay, and then commercial recreation facility use buildings. Any of the language that is you see here would be the modifications from the standard UDO 32 overlay language.
I know what it was. It was when I read that, it was the next bullet point that the articulated cornices or roofline modulations, that part goes away. And I'm fine with that, but so it still stays for the wall, which is good. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Yep, yeah, you got it.
Thank you.
All right, we kind of got very deep into this section. Were you through with whatever it was that you
I
wanted to
am.
present?
Yeah, I think other than there's one language change that I brought up with Kevin today. Wes, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it. It's in the section regarding the church and the event center. And I think in an overabundance of caution, and quite frankly, Matt Skelton and the Morris Group brought this to my attention. I just missed it right here. Not that we're not working hard on the church and event and reception center. That area, if by chance the church I'm working with somehow folds on me or doesn't bring what they're supposed to bring to the table, I'd like to have some flexibility. Instead of saying shall be required in area D, you know, we can have other qualified uses for that area. Instead of just saying, all I have to do is I have to wait until I get a church there. Because, you know, I had Crossroads and then they ultimately used me to increase their situation at Centennial, you know, widen it, bigger, make out. So that paragraph, I'd like to address that shall be and give me a little more flexibility. Did I say that
Are you-
correctly?
Are we talking about page 4 at the very top, church event?
Page 8, very top.
Yeah, the only thing that I would, so this paragraph, and then there was one in the multi-use area too. It seemed unintentional, that the uses were, that this was to be a restriction on use, because there's a whole permitted use section that is not modified from the prior PUD. So, I mean, this is actually supposed to be governing architecture. And it would seem that there's just inadvertently, there was this can be interpreted to restrict the other permitted uses in this district. And being the owners of that real estate, the area east of, what is that,
Wood Farms Place.
Wood Farms, place, yeah. I mean, we're not interested in limiting any further the uses, and I don't think that was ever the intention. It looks like it was just an inadvertent addition to the PUD.
So how do you work that into the concept plan that very specifically shows a large vertical oval church event reception center area? Well, down below it is a mixed use area 3.
Right.
Are you suggesting that maybe that whole area have the availability of a church, but otherwise it's a mixed use as
Correct.
as already referenced?
And I think the standards of the PUD provide for architectural exhibits that apply to churches, and also architectural exhibits that would apply to commercial buildings.
Right.
And that's what is in effect today. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know if the exhibits are, but the uses are permitted today.
So
Or, go ahead,
you're
Jimmy.
saying that the way this is written is limiting it to a church event or reception center, and that the original PUD has a wider range of uses that you don't want to exclude. Is that correct?
Correct.
You could hear that?
Yep.
I couldn't hear, but. Could you?
If we were to do that, said that there are architectural standards associated with that. So is that on page, at the top of page 4 in this revision, we would remove that whole section on church event reception use built in the materials?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think, and haven't had a lot of time to think about this. This was just brought to my attention late this afternoon. I think my initial thought would be, if if there's a way that we can say in the PUD, you know, if a church event or reception center are developed, then these architectural standards apply or something like, right? So we don't lose
Right.
all of the architectural stuff that we've worked on and talked about for the church and event center. That's not going away, but it's not necessarily standards that we would want to apply to a mixed use building, I don't think, unless I'm wrong. And then,
It's kind of an if then.
yeah, I think,
No,
I think,
I get that.
Then
I
we
think
do
it
this.
would be,
It
Could
should be
be.
easy to do by just removing the compulsory language in that paragraph. Maybe just eliminate the shall language, everything else is there.
Well, if I may, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but on that picture, if I'm looking at the picture, it looks like you're building one right there.
Right, that's what I was getting at. We need to square it with
So,
this concept plan.
If you're not, or maybe building something there, correct. I agree with you that it needs to correspond, because I'm looking at it from a fresh perspective here, and it looks to me like you're building one there. Which is what I'm guessing that language probably corresponded to at some point.
And
So,
it just needs to be reconciled with the list of uses that are permitted on the property today.
so if,
Is it as simple as just putting if included in front of that whole description and under part B where it says church event reception center, parenthetically, if included?
I like the way Kevin said the language. I mean, I'm happy to work with staff to make sure that it corresponds. If they don't, I mean, they're competent enough to do this on their own, but I'm thinking in this picture, perhaps if you're also going to do a mixed use up where the church is, can you just put mixed use up there too?
Just make sure
broaden
Or-
out the,
Yeah, or some, I mean,
yeah.
instead of making that so specific.
I'm fine with that.
Mhm.
And I haven't heard anybody on commission making comments to the effect that this is a problem, a deal killer of some sort. So I think we're all somewhat in large agreement on do it.
I mean, do you see
We
what I'm
just need
saying
to
on
craft
that?
the language that,
Do you see what I'm saying on that? Like, if we
As
just
long as
add
it's not
mixed use
residential.
up there.
No, I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. I mean, we won't be building it, so
Right.
Church ought to probably respond.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that would probably, I would think that would address the issue.
Yeah, and we
So-
would,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we would really want to take a look through the entirety of the PUD. I mean, there's 25 pages here
Right.
of language. We would, as staff, we really want to run a comb through this to make sure there's no other references, no other, connections being made. We don't want to have a loose wire here. If that is the direction that is being proposed here.
And I've looked at it, I know you'll need to do your own review, but I
Yeah.
think it really is probably that simple. The only other comment that we had on the language of the PUD is there's a section in here for a multi-use area that has the same problem. It seems to have a land use restriction, and I think if that was the intent, it would have been in the land use section of the PUD. This does not purport to modify the permitted use list of the PUD.
So let's take this one area, the church event, and it sounds like what everybody is saying is we want to have the other uses that are in the original PUD continue to be available here. But if we choose to make it a church, and I'm not sure if that's listed in the original PUD, I guess that's what staff would be looking at, then this would be the conditions that would be applied to the architectural standards of that church. So does that take care of that section? Matt?
I think so. I mean, I think the staff will probably have to review it more carefully, but yeah, I
Yeah.
believe it's that
That's the gist
simple.
of it. Okay. And
Yeah,
then the other,
initially speaking, yes, but, this is something new that we would have to look at just to make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed.
and looking at the corresponding district plan, Kristen just brought up, it can't become residential, so it's clearly defined as District 1, which does not include residential, so it needs to remain District 1. for whatever it is that it is going forward. And District 4 and 3 are established, and that's their limits with whatever the number of home sites is. It's not going to become part of District 2. So we just need to make sure it remains brown and do what we need to do to allow the use or not. And we don't probably need to try to craft that language amongst all of us between Kevin Weston and Ashley between now and when you come back to get a recommendation. So that's the way we end today. That can get ironed out. And all of the corresponding references from page to page can be double checked.
So other than those points in the language, we've done a lot of other, I don't know, Weston, if you want to go over all the red lines that you did, but you summarized them earlier.
Yeah.
With that, I just, Matt and Mr. Morris will discuss where they're at with the park and the exhibit, that the last exhibit I believe we're gonna have.
Can we just tidy up the land use?
I can't hear what Jenny said, so I don't know even where you guys are at.
Jenny, if you're speaking,
Where is, Matt, where is that section so I can look at it?
it's on page 6,
Okay,
the area called mixed use
Mixed use.
units.
sure.
This would seem to require mixed use units. And there are uses that could happen on this property that wouldn't necessarily be mixed use. They wouldn't necessarily have residential.
I guess I'm gonna leave that to staff to, I think they want to comb through that to see.
Yeah, I think this may be a worthy of discussion then, because I think our understanding is that this is supposed to be mixed use
Right.
development in this area or district,
The
based
buil-
on the recent discussions at
The
these
buildings
boards.
themselves,
Mhm.
and that's.
In like mixed use area 1, 2, 3, like not necessarily all of, I don't even know what it's called, area B now, but within that bubble of mixed use area 1, the buildings, I believe the discussion was that the buildings were to be mixed use buildings.
Well, but mixed use area 2, I think we had that defined minimum, you could do a single
Yeah,
building
that's different. I agree. I think that opened up a little bit for,
for
Single
individual
partic-
buildings like a grocery store or,
I believe so, going off memory.
uh,
But one, that bigger circle to the, yeah, right there, I feel like there's pretty focused discussion on, and if that's not correct, then this is probably the time to work that out.
And I have been present for all your conversations. This just looked like an accident, like it was an inadvertent restriction. Well, I can't even tell if it's really supposed to restrict the permitted uses on the property, because this only talks about one, and there's many.
There's no error in the ordinance as it's presented. This is just a new information that we need to
No, and I
work
didn't mean
through.
error. I mean,
So
it's just inadvertent. How's that?
this is new information that we would have to digest and talk through. But as a staff, I mean, we support the ordinance as it is today, but if there's a different direction, then we need to talk through that.
and you're saying the ordinance today allows other permitted uses.
It's, yes. I mean, well, the default ordinance, I mean, the permitted use list in the original ordinance is not modified by this,
Okay.
at least, but if it is intended to be, then I guess that's a question. Was that the intention?
Well, I laid out my planned use for it. And that's why the bubble plan came in this area, because we didn't know exactly within lease land or the owned land, because, that came to their attention a couple of months ago. So, I guess we're talking the same thing, is that in case, I get run over in a car and somebody else chooses to develop it, they wanted flexibility to do something in that area if my plan's not being taken through. Is that kind of where we're at?
I mean, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, and there are permitted.
Yeah,
I mean,
uses.
Yeah, uses on the property today, and it wasn't our intention to really modify those, although the architectural standards that are agreed upon, I mean, we're comfortable with those. I mean, they're high standards, it seems like.
I mean, I'm trying to think through this, on the fly here. But I'm not aware of any restriction on use. Like the GB underlying is that all of that would be permitted. It's just requiring mixed-use units to be incorporated.
Yeah,
To
it
that
says
area.
mixed-use units shall be developed. So it requires that.
Yeah, but it doesn't restrict any uses. Like,
Well, I mean, I guess if you don't see that as a restriction, I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
it's just a requirement. I'm just trying to understand.
I think the key is it says the mixed use elements shall be developed. It doesn't say there have to be mixed use elements, right? It just says the mixed use elements that are there basically, or that are put there shall be developed in
area one.
area one as defined on the concept plan. It doesn't say they even have to be there. It says the mixed use units that are there, that if they are developed there, shall be developed.
Now, then we're in agreement with that, if that's what it's saying.
I don't see it as a restriction, but I'm not the one who's going to interpret this. I think Kevin and staff needs to.
Well, we have a chance to wordsmith it a little better between now and the next one.
Yeah, we'll,
It does say the third floor needs to have the short-term rental units farther down in that paragraph.
Say again.
You can utilize the second floor for retail, provided that the third floor contains short-term rental units.
But the
You have to
issue,
figure out the wording, but it does. say-
General retail uses.
You're saying that
Some-
the use restriction, but I mean, what is right above that little thing that says mixed use units? I'm just trying to say
Is that
from the way I'm reading this right now, it's kind of like pointing out the different areas in the ordinance, like there's the promenade and mixed use, so there's a water feature, so.
Yeah, basically, the way this ordinance reads, Area C, you find yourself in mixed use Area 1. The ordinance identifies the major elements in mixed use Area 1. So you have the water feature,
Yeah.
promenade, mixed use units, and then you move into mixed use Area 2.
so this is intended to define the
Define.
components that are, I'm gonna say required, and if that's not the right word, then we need to talk about that too, but required to be within each of these areas.
That's how I would interpret it.
So that would be a land use
Yeah,
restriction. And the form of it, is one thing, and then the mix of uses is another. If there are going to be required to be residential units in mixed use area 1, then we haven't had that conversation. So if that's supposed to be compulsory, then we don't, we can talk more about it.
Well, under the mixed use units, it makes reference to buildings of 2 to 3 stories, not allowing a single story, featuring general retail uses on the ground floor with short-term rental units above. So if there's a 2-story building, it's retail and rental. If it's a 3-story building, it's still retail and rental and rental.
Right.
It's not really residential like we talk about residential that are in the other sections. These are classified as a hotel.
The underlying zoning here is GB, is it not?
Correct.
Okay. And that doesn't change with this, or does it? And that's my question for staff.
And that's my question. That's our question.
Yeah, I know. I try to make it simple. Because I think what Matt's asking is, it's a GB underlying zoning. Does this section about mixed use just define what a mixed use would look like in that area, or does it limit the area to just mixed use instead of the GB? And that's what Matt's asking, and I don't know the answer to that.
I can review and get back to you on that. I'd have to look at way too much right now in order to get a quick answer. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And I haven't got the original ordinance in front of me either, so And let me ask another question. Was it the intention when we talked about this for the Plan Commission to do away with the underlying GB zoning and make this mixed use? I didn't think it was, but that's my question for the other APC members.
I would interject that we would still want or need an underlying district, even if it was the intent to, I don't know, require or move towards some sort of mixed use.
That was my understanding.
Use
as
requirement,
well,
we
at least
still
the way I-
need an
Yeah.
underlying
Right.
something.
We need to have an underlying zoning, and I've always been looking at it as GB down there, whether or not it ever actually gets developed in anything that looks like GB, because maybe all these other things come together nicely with your program, and it looks like its own unique thing, but we still have to have GB there, just in case.
Yes.
When we read it the first time, we kind of read it the way Jenny had stated it, that if mixed-use buildings are to be done, these are the standards that you follow, because there's a other set of standards for buildings that are not mixed use.
Right. That's the way I read it. I don't read it
But
as
that-
limiting,
I don't
but
think that's what it says.
if that's what you don't think it says, then I think staff needs to work on. The underlying zoning is GB, and that would follow any standards for GB. But if mixed use goes in here, these would be the standards. That's how I interpret what we were saying. It may not be the way this is written, and I guess that's up for Matt and Kevin to kind of figure out, right?
And and I think there's exhibits in this PUD that require commercial buildings to look a certain way. And
And we haven't thrown those out, have we?
No,
Okay.
So I'll jump in and say, right, wrong, or otherwise, I interpreted this one the opposite of what Jenny just described. So whereas the one with the church, I interpreted like you're trying to make it non-compulsory, like if the church goes there, it can look like this. This one, the way the mixed use is actually in the bubble diagrams on the site, in the concept plan, I actually interpreted the other way, that there will be mixed use there, and this is how it needs to be developed. Again, right or wrong, that was the direction I thought it was, so.
Well, and I guess I think that's the direction we thought that was going as well, so.
well, that's why we're bringing it up.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we
And
go
that's good.
way back here, Birch, you can jump in, but that was a market need to do this mixed use. I mean, the baseball teams want
Areas to
an
live.
area
yeah.
like that.
And that's
So
why
that was
we-
part of this PUD, was to support Grand Park
Yeah, and the
with short-term
Airbnb,
rental.
correct. I mean, that's
I don't
my
wanna
intent
see
to build it.
that, like, just go away.
What the conversation is try to complete the full circle in case, I don't finish the development, somebody else wants to step in or, let's say construction financing for multifamily goes to nothing, whereas right now it's pretty strong. It's probably one of the stronger. So what Matt and his client are worried about is a worst case scenario. That's why we're discussing full options.
But I
My
think-
plan is to get all this done, and I got users in line to do it, but it's gonna take time. FBC, pickleball, these are my two primary ones to get done first, along with the infrastructure. I'm not even gonna look at doing the Airbnbs till 24, 25. I just don't have that much borrowing power to do 100 million all in one shot.
No, I understand that. I understand all that. Thank you. I appreciate all that. What I'm saying is if we change this language, I don't want to lose that in that section.
Mhm.
And if we're going to lose it, then somebody needs to come back and ask us as a city for that, because I think we're counting on that short-term rental to
Yeah.
help Grand Park. And so I know that this is another section, so if the language in that section needs to change, I get that. But I think as a city, we were counting on these short-term rental units to service Grand Park.
As in mind to support
In
my
this
tournaments.
PUD, so I just don't want to lose that with this.
And nothing we're
Language.
suggesting would prevent it from happening. It would just, it just wouldn't require it if he doesn't do the project. And he's gonna do it, he's under contract to do the project.
But then someone would have to come in with an amendment. If we free this up today and just say it's GB and we don't have to have short-term rental in this PUD, then those buildings can be any type of commercial.
It is
We
today.
lose that use.
Yeah, it's permitted today that way.
Well.
Yeah, I think the twist here in the story is when the amendment came through, I don't know if the vision shifted or it became more focused. Maybe that's a better way to think of it, is that it would be, I mean, that's what I think the discussion was, is these will be this. Planning Commission said, we want this. So yeah, I think it is a land use.
So in fairness, what Kevin said, yeah, they got more focus as we started understanding the geometries and moving the pickleball to the west side of the road because of building size, and the FEC or the sports tech to the east, and so I agree, it's more focused. All I'm saying is that, you know, they're worried if I don't do it, they want to have some flexibility there. Is that not the
We just want to
short?
preserve the flexibility that exists.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that the either or on the church and the mixed use on the east side seemed to be pretty acceptable, most people who talked, but less so in the Brown section, mixed use 2, mixed use 1. I think that's a discussion to give them feedback on. If that's if as a board, we're not supportive of a GB use in that mixed use area 1, you know, solely those standards, then that's some feedback they need, because it's a threshold issue between the landlord and Birch.
Well said, Dave. I think that's very well said.
And I think from an architectural perspective and from you know, all the promenade standards and things of that, I mean, all those would still apply. There just wouldn't be, the structures today are not required to be.
Right.
And probably aren't permitted to be, include residential. If this is a development option that would accommodate the incorporation of residential into this commercial area, I mean, that's how we would prefer to have this designed, because there are entitlements that are in place today for the real estate that aren't bad. They're just, I mean, there's plenty of restrictions. There's GB, and then there's a list of additional uses, and there's a list of prohibited uses. I mean, that was already approved by the Plan Commission. And so, and this ordinance does not purport to modify that use list, although you can read this section narrowly, and it does that.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think the
that's why-
discussion's important to have, and clarity is gonna be important to have. And what I'm just trying to say is, this board should give you feedback on, because what I'm hearing, I think, is that the board wants that mixed use element. We wouldn't be happy if there's a change and somebody comes back and they have a right to do a GB and they just do a GB with no residential element to it. I don't think that would necessarily be looked on as a great thing, as a favorable thing. I may be misreading things, but.
And that's not our preference, but.
Right. But I think that, like I say, the either or is fine on the property to the east.
Right.
But I think there's a preference for the mixed use, for the refinements that have been made recently, the greater focus. And once this is brought to our attention, hey, that's a good idea, we want that. As opposed to the other side where, okay, you can have flexibility there, but we want the mixed use there, but I'll yield to others.
Yeah, I think Dave's right on the mark that we do need to give feedback on this, and I'll say where I stand, so this is my feedback, is as we've gone through the workshop process, and as we collectively, and I would submit wisely, got away from the building shapes and stopped playing architect so much and started putting the ovals here that made the bubble diagram, I think that got us to the right level of focus, and that level of focus did include where the mixed use is relative to other elements in the district. So the concept plan, as laid out, to me, that is still my preference, is those items there as the ordinance is currently written. So that's my feedback, is that that was the intent. And I thought by going through the workshopping process to that point, that is the intent for the development right now. I do think it still is the intent, and that we all like that. And to Kristen's point earlier, if that changes, then I think that takes us back a workshop or two. I think we'd want to rethink it.
I would, you know, what Andre just said. So
I think, Dave, to your point, the property to the east, so we're talking about that area where the church and the event center is currently. That's the part that I think, Matt, you and your client are concerned about. So,
Yeah.
and the Brown, oh, because you own half of that as well.
Right.
Oh. okay.
Or most of it.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
Where is that line again?
It's probably about on the edge of where the water feature.
Somewhere right through. I think it's right through here.
Let's say where the two circles intersect is
Yeah.
closer. It's pretty simple. You got 8.5 acres of owned land, you got 18 acres of leased land in that little block. We call that, right now it's block A as far as our print, so what is it, 60/40, 70/35, something around there.
this, part of this problem is that PUDs are supposed to be under one ownership or control, and now we have two bodies kind of competing, and I understand that, but it makes it awkward for the APC to deal with two different.
Well, like PUD, we had Airbnbs on that property going across. So
And there's
it's not like-
there's no competition either. I mean, we're in full support of, we're in support of Birch's plan, and we want it to be developed that way. But if he doesn't end up being the one that develops the real estate, then the existing rules, we would prefer to have them available to us so we don't have to go back through this process. I mean,
Well, you don't have to go through the process if it changes, if the plans change
Right.
from what's
Right,
amended.
right.
So,
And we haven't got our heads wrapped around that. I mean, that wasn't our intention to do that, but I mean, we can have that conversation.
yeah, I guess from that, just personally, what you're suggesting to have flexibility on the turquoise section is fine. That's fully supportive of that. If there's a church, fine, it meets the standards. Otherwise, it's all mixed use. In the brown section, I don't feel that way. I would, in essence, consider that a use restriction. Thus, the ordinance would have to be reviewed to make sure it's consistent with that. But that's just me.
I think you're pretty well encapsulating the general sentiments of the entire body here.
So then
The
you guys
quandary
just
is,
have,
how do we make that the requirement and still maintain an underlying zoning that is GB? Or do we actually have enough specificity and things included in this that somehow or other will be secure without an underlying zoning or a catch-all? That we've not done PUDs without an underlying zoning. We need to make sure that somehow or other that is only an underlying zoning for something that is just not covered in the ordinance. It's the underlying catch-all, and it doesn't become the default for the development.
but it's not the default, it's just it's the baseline that is being amended by everything in the PUD, right? I'm misstating that? I mean, it's not like,
So
it doesn't say you can go GB or you can do this. GB is the zoning for area 1, except for all the stuff that's in the PUD. So if that's the case, then it, I mean, yeah, you have to have an underlying zoning, otherwise you'd have to restate every single thing.
Right.
So that's its only purpose, is it saves you from text. Right?
Yeah, we'd have a 300-page
Right.
document if we didn't. That we'd be creating.
Yes, there is an underlying zoning. today.
Right, of course.
And I don't believe it's proposed to change.
But it's not a reversionary thing. It's not, if you don't do, you can either develop a GB or you can do what's in the PUD.
Which
Gotta do what's
we
in the-
are
You gotta do what's in
trying.
the PUD.
Right.
Right, it's the default. It's the underlying, so to the extent that anything that isn't addressed in the PUD that would normally apply, it would default to whatever the standards are in general business, and in this case, the original PUD.
So
But the
in
trick we're
my-
trying to solve is how do we let that be, but get what it is that we've all gotten accustomed to seeing in the tan area? Because it sounds like we don't have the assurance without some serious wordsmithing here to figure out how to say that is what that area needs to be. Underlying zoning can't just be what you decide to do.
And I
have
think what you're wanting is what this purports to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Those
some,
people can
there's
tell
some
us that, that
cleaner
we're good.
ways to do it, but I mean, I think what you're angling for is what this is trying to do. What we're explaining is that what you're trying to accomplish and what we're comfortable with is maybe not the same thing, and we have to spend more time on this.
Well, I think our role is just to tell you what we'd like to see.
Yep.
And then you guys, between staff and petitioner and the two petitioners, or however you want to look at it, you guys.
So
do that.
it was the plan commission's intention to limit this to a single use.
Speaking for myself, yes, I'll let others chime in.
And Jenny here, I agree with Dave.
I think it's yes all around unless somebody wants to speak up and say, no, actually, I look at it different.
A single use as in meaning mixed use.
Right.
Mixed.
Or
Right.
Yeah.
retail.
Second and or third
Commercial with residential and above.
hotel, not just regular residential, but rental.
Yeah,
On
terminal,
Because
no
what,
apartments.
I don't think what we want to see anymore anywhere around Grand Park is more of that single use. You know, we talked a lot about that with what's going in across from the PAC at our last meeting. We don't necessarily want that single use because we want to better utilize the area around Grand Park. So allowing something to be mixed use, whether it's commercial, residential, et cetera, but just having that all in one space as opposed to just one thing, it's a better utilization of it.
And you used the word allow, I like that, but this is require, and that's different. That's the difference.
I feel like we're going in a little bit of a circle, but we're all trying to say the same thing, and we want you to come back with an end product that gets us what we're trying to describe to you, and I don't know how we solve that tonight. I just think we probably can't. But we need all the bright minds that are writing the language that try to convey this clearly and unambiguously to achieve that goal for us. And
You guys will,
have to go off into your little writer's pens to do that and then get back to us.
you guys will propose what you want, and our job is just to give you feedback of what we want. And obviously, if it's closer, the closer they are together, the smoother the results will, the process will go.
I agree with
Yeah, that's
Mr. Orcas. Quit beating that dog and move on to the last issue, I think, with us is the park. So Matt, you want to explain your exhibit and
Sure.
the
Weston,
points?
I sent this to you earlier.
Yeah.
If you could pull it up. So we've had an opportunity, our civil design people have had an opportunity to work with the city, and the exhibit that that we'll hopefully be able to show here
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
is really just I mean, it's probably not even necessary, that your exhibit N is adequate, but this, rather than show alternative locations for the active recreation area, in working with the city, we've identified exactly where it will be. And so the exhibit that'll be pulled up here will show,
Is it not on the agenda?
You don't have access to the
We
CD
just-
drive under your current login.
That's what I just realized. We don't have
it's in your email.
He's not logged in as him currently. He's logged in as a
I
presenter.
can send it to
You're
anybody.
not allowed to get your emails.
No,
Well,
he's not logged
I'm
in
the,
that way.
this isn't me that's logged in, right?
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, here it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Would you like to pass it around? It's just a,
That's cool.
Jenny.
It'll be helpful to get it on the screen if somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
How'd you get it?
I printed it.
I was in an email.
Yeah.
No, that may not be exactly.
Can you, do you want to email it to me real quick?
Yeah.
Weston, on your phone?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Send it to Chris.
That's good, because
I
I
haven't.
It's gonna be
Anyway,
Larson.
we can demystify the exhibit that you have by showing the actual location, and that's all. it
We need to
does.
do that, so
Yeah.
Christopher said he'd get it for us.
Yeah,
Get it,
this is
yeah.
which-
While we're waiting for that, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Wood Farm Place is used in the PUD, but I don't see any definition or what it is. I mean, maybe I'm just missing it and I'm dumb, but what is Wood Farm Place and where is it identified somewhere in the?
Road name,
Yeah, it's located on the concept plan. It's a road
Okay.
name.
Okay, good. I just wasn't sure.
It's one that goes right up between the two pieces of property we've been talking about for an hour.
Okay,
yeah.
And then I think the
I
only,
thought I was
the-
kind of confused.
I think there were exhibits included that showed the active recreation equipment as well, which the city has picked out.
I think that was the agenda.
And that's on the agenda.
Yes.
That's Exhibit M is what the city will be building. I mean, that's the style of equipment that they'll be installing, and then we've identified where it will be located.
So I'm sorry, Matt, can you back up a little bit? You're talking about the city. What's transpired there?
So I think that at the last meeting, Jeremy had indicated that they would be interested in acquiring the park, and they intend to build the playground equipment. And so we worked with the city and Chris McConnell to identify the location within the park property that works, which is identified here in that hashed or shaded area. And then I'm guessing that I didn't have anything to do with preparing these exhibits, so I'm not sure who provided who what, but these are consistent with the playground equipment that we've approved. The city has proposed it and we've signed off on it.
Is the city paying for that?
It'll be a city park, yeah, they're gonna build the equipment.
So somehow the cost of doing a park that was in this PUD is shifted to the taxpayers.
No, that's not accurate at all.
Okay,
Playground equipment maybe, but there's a lot of land work to do on that. You gotta drain it, you gotta put in all your water and sewer, the drainage pond and all that stuff that drains a park. I mean, just the land work on 5 acres is well over 300,000. The landscaping and all that.
are you doing that, Bert?
Yeah, that's part of the agreement with the Woods family on the purchase. So I said, my cap is 300 grand.
Kevin, is this somehow captured somewhere? I mean, this is like a
We were
pretty
just
big
talking,
shift.
we were just talking about that.
Okay.
I know.
I
Um,
mean, this
If
is a-
so, it
this
won't
is a
be in the
big
PUD, it'll be outside of the PUD ordinance. If there is to be something like that, that's not a land use.
Well, I don't know about the land transfer from Woods family to the city, not my business, but in the PUD, it says the park has to be done within 1 year of pulling the first permit. And we should be getting a permit here in the next 30 days. And just so you know, when we go in and put in the road and the drainage, the pond, now there's a big pond I'm doing, it's pond number 2. Pond number 1's way up north that Weekly's doing on their property. But when we do pond number 2, which the park drains into, we'll do all the contouring of the land, which their engineer has worked with our engineer. We have to do so much to make it drain to it. You gotta put in all the structures. So you're familiar when you see a pond, that concrete, the outlet, and then you gotta have, the hook to the storm. Then you have sanitary lines, connections, and water lines, because they're gonna have a potential bathroom on here at some point in the future. So let's say all that earthwork totals 300 grand plus the trees. It's not shown on this plan, but his engineers created a landscaping plan of grasses, trails, crushed stone, trees. And so that'll all be installed, up to a $300,000 cap. And then the playground equipment, if it's underneath 300 grand, we still have the money, we'll end up paying for that. Unless they cut another deal. I don't know what the deal is between the two. So,
What happens if you meet your cap? What happens after you meet your cap? Who pays after that?
If there are improvements that are outside of what the playground that the city will be building, then they're on us. This is a legacy project for the family. And so it's just part of the transaction with Birch. He covers the first $300,000 and we expect it to be more.
So what does the city ultimately get? They get conveyed that chunk?
The entire,
The goal is
it's
to
our intention to
donate
everything.
it's like 5 acres. It's a big piece of
Yeah.
dirt.
That whole green?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So then you'll have there'll be a development agreement or with the,
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah,
that the city sets, okay, you get it to this stage and then we'll take it.
And the timing of it is important for us because we're trying to just, maximize our donation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, just going back to Kristen's first point. The reason why the city most likely would be paying for playground equipment is because that is what this commission showed interest in. Initially, families, again, correct me if I'm wrong, showed hesitation in putting the playground equipment because you didn't want to pay for that aspect because that was a more expense. So the city stepping in to be able to provide that playground equipment to allow for all ages, et cetera, due to the wish of the commission, and sure parts of the community as well.
Well, let's go back one more step, which is it was in the PUD and there was a beautiful playground in the PUD and they were paying for it.
Right, and we view it as necessary for the single-family homes and all the other housing options nearby, which well into the process of figuring all this out, we come to understand that wasn't the vision of the Wood family originally. That's now been massaged enough that there's an acceptable place where all this can happen. And Jeremy jumped in at the previous meeting with the clarity that all of the confusion about does the city want this or not, that yes, we're going to make this a park priority for us and we'd like to have this wherever it is that your team becomes agreeable to it. And I'm not sure who funds out of the park budget or impact fees for the parks or somehow or other
I think that, I don't want to speak on Jeremy's behalf and he can make his own comments, but I think the rationale is that the project that's happening, the larger residential aspect of this project would likely fund and then some, the improvements that they would be making.
And I don't recall if that was specifically mentioned or not, but that could be.
And then I think that because this has a larger service area than a neighborhood, it's more than a neighborhood park. It's a community trailhead.
But that particular equipment is more probably for the.
It has that effect.
Potential residents and their offspring that might actually need something like that because it wasn't included with any of the weekly plans. But we had an expectation as a commission that that was going to be there for that purpose, so we couldn't let it go. So it's worked out harmoniously that we're going to have it, and somebody will have to explain and take care of the funds to get all those parts there in a year.
Yeah.
So how are we doing that?
I don't know if anybody in this room
That's
knows.
getting added to Chris's park plan and all these different, this just seems like a lot of moving parts to me. How are we gonna document all of it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that all of this falls in the purview of the Plan Commission, frankly. This is a land use discussion and an amenity discussion, and I think the components necessary from a zoning perspective are in here. The components that I think you're asking about fall outside of the Plan Commission, so probably with administration.
Not our problem.
Yeah,
Well, no.
And I'm not trying to punt, but I'm just trying to keep us
No,
focused, right? Because I don't want to lose.
Right now, the playground equipment is in the PUD. This amendment was asking to take it out.
But then discussion occurred and it became evident that it was important
Correct.
to keep it in,
Yeah,
right?
So right
so
now, the
playground
playground
equipment's in, it's right
Equipment
there.
in there.
Play-
now
Park
it's being
amenities should
moved out to the
include
city.
playground equipment. Number 8.
The playground equipment is in the original PUD.
A
We're
picture.
all in agreement, right? There's a nice picture, good playground equipment.
Well,
Yeah, but
is there
there's-
anything wrong with that one?
No, it's
Well,
fantastic.
that's the character exhibits they gave us. on the
But who do we
website.
have?
She's talking about
It's
the original
fantastic.
PUD. There was a picture of a swing set in the original PUD. I think you could argue that there wasn't a whole lot of backup for that. So that's what the planning commission has decided they want, and they have it.
Which is all fantastic. So all I'm asking is, we have a PUD where that was part of the PUD and it would be happening, for sure. Now with this amendment, what I'm hearing is the land will be done. So where then is the commitment for the playground equipment?
It's still there. I mean,
Yeah,
if you go
it's
to
still in
page
the,
9.
that part is still a zoning requirement.
The only
in the PUD.
difference
It is.
is,
So, and then there's a timeline on when that's going to be completed.
And
when
that's
the
still,
city's going-
that's still in
it's
there
still there,
too.
1
So
year
we're not
after.
taking any of that.
Right.
Okay. thank
I
you.
think the
That's all
only thing that we don't have clear answer on is the city's agreement with the landowner on, I don't know.
That vehicle has not been discussed.
Yeah,
It was
on-
determined.
Past
on
us.
payment and
Not all of it.
that's.
Okay.
That's-
As long as
I
there's
just wanted to
something
make sure it was
city-
still in the
Right.
PUD.
Yeah, I
That's
think,
all
I think
was
all that
asking. Sorry,
stuff,
Kevin.
no worries. Yeah, I think all the stuff that we're talking about and concerned with are still in the PUD.
Okay.
Those
Okay,
pieces are there. The mechanics of making sure that the city pays for it or it becomes part of a city park or not, that's outside of, in my opinion.
For sure.
Outside of zoning.
As long as there's something in there that gives leverage that it's gonna get done, or the rest doesn't proceed, at some point. There's some teeth to whatever the deadline requirement is.
Yeah, I think there is. We'll hold up permits or something, as I
It's
recall.
1 year from the first permit pull.
Which is what
It has to be complete by
Has to
then.
be
you're
complete.
concerned.
And what I'm saying is when we put in Wood Farm Place Road and that pond, all the infrastructure work for that park will get done. Landscaping will get done whenever they, decide what trees gets planted where. And, once my money's exhausted, then they step in and do it. So theoretically, if they don't do a deal with the city and I spent my 300, they'll end up paying for the playground equipment. That's what it says there.
So I have a question for staff here. On this paragraph, the application for a detailed development plan review for the park, trailhead, and District 2 shall be submitted within 1 year from the issuance of a first improvement location permit for the real estate. And I'm assuming, number one, that is the entire real estate, which means probably the first pulled permit will be for a residential lot. Is that correct? Is this talking about the entire, it doesn't say this.
Permits for the road and the infrastructure.
She's talking about that building.
Building permit.
Improvement location.
That's
permit. So-
not what it says. It says just permanent.
No, it says within 1 year from the issuance of a first improvement location permit.
Well,
It's
what do you
it's
think a road is?
That's a
It
building.
doesn't require, it'd be square footage under roof.
Yeah.
It'd be a.
No,
Okay, it's
I agree
anything.
with that.
So, and that's for the entire parcel, including the residential to the north, right?
Uh,
It says for the real estate. Does the real estate mean the entire parcel?
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
Thank you. That was number one question. The second one is that the application for a development plan review will be done within a year, but it says nothing about when shall be within 1 year after. Okay, so we have 2 years to put the park in. A year for the development plan review to be put in after the first building permit, and then another year to actually
build it.
install it. Okay, got it. I just wanted to understand that.
I mean, that was the original language.
Right.
Uh,
Have we discussed what we need to discuss regarding the park?
I think so. Is that you?
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
feel like you've
the
got
take-
all of the clarity that you need as the petitioner.
The takeaway, I think, from our perspective, we're fine with exactly the way it's proposed, but would suggest replacing the one exhibit with the more current exhibit.
All right, so we have a point now where staff will recap the notes to.
Sorry, Bob, before we do that, I
Sure.
apologize. I want to take us back, hopefully very briefly, to District 1. We went so quickly from the land use restriction discussion over the park that I didn't get to slip this one in. I wanted, first of all, to pay a compliment. I think the description of a lot of these different elements, like the water feature actually has, I think it's a square area, and it talks about vertical features and seasonal elements, and the promenade has like contiguous grass areas, and there's a lot of things that I think are specific enough to really define the scale and quality without actually getting too detailed into the design of it. And I think that's great. The one area that I thought might be missing a little bit is the plaza. Gives an area of a 1/4 acre. This was someplace on page 7. Oh, it's right there in front. And that might need a little bit more definition. I believe that I understand and embrace Birch's vision for what that plaza is. It's such a focal point and really draws people in, which is why that's so important. I was looking at this, but if, for example, it ends up where it's at the intersection of two buildings, a 1/4 acre isn't that big by the time you have some circulation space along the buildings and everything. I don't know what that boundary counts. I guess that might need a little bit of attention to define that a little bit better. So the only thing that I caught on that.
Comments, Birch?
Well, I mean, it's 12,000 feet roughly, 1/4 of an acre, 10,000 feet. So, I mean, we could, you know, by hook or crook, it might be bigger. I mean, you know, I guess.
I think what you're expecting to do with this is what I would be very happy with. But I think the language might need to be that 1/4 acre is in an area that is not also used for general circulation,
Yeah.
whatever. So that really gets reserved better to.
Dedicated
Yeah.
plaza area, non-circulation area, that I get.
Yep, that was it. Thank you.
We can find that, so pretty easy. So obviously the front steps of the building going up would not count towards that 1/4 acre.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is just more usable space counting towards that minimum, or program space, you know, not just leftover space. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So Andre, I have a very detailed construction quote from my contractor on that I'd be happy to share with staff and they can share with you. And that'll tell you how many square feet of concrete I'm putting out there. But I bet you it's over 1/4 of an acre of concrete because it's wrapping around both sides of the building. And they actually, contrary to what I wanted, they quoted fire pits and pergolas out there and shaded, you know, to make it more of a sitting area. And
If you want to share that, that's great. I'd look at it. I'm interested, but to me, that's above and beyond. The question really was just to get the ordinance language cleaned up a bit to where it is, as I just heard the wording, that it is actually program space for the plaza, and that, you know, leftover circulation stuff just doesn't infringe upon that. Again, if you end up not developing it, but I don't think I'm asking anything different than what you're already proposing. It's just language.
And I read all that too and really didn't stop and think about how big is a 1/4 of an acre. It's like my backyard, which is pretty big when I'm mowing it, not so big other times.
Well, I think that building's gonna be the first one out of the ground because it's moving very quickly. We selected a contractor and it's going to shell drawings now, so details on that'll probably be around in April, May, you'll see it. But it's gonna be cool out front. It'll be real cool. That's the key to that entry. And, you know, we had to take into account, you know, the roundabout that's going in there too. So it may look somewhat awkward at first, because we have to leave, dirt that otherwise, in fact, they just made us move a manhole today on our prints, because we had a manhole there for our sanitary. Well, the roundabout will be there, how you gotta move it, those are all the, the tweaks that comes about with development, so. Recap time, Weston, is that you then?
Yeah. Let's see, so we started off by talking about the materials. We discussed the architectural insulated panel, so that'll have to be something that gets placed into the ordinance as an approved material. Following that, we moved into the church discussion to allow a little bit more flexibility in that church area and more loosely define that as mixed use area 4. So I think that's what we landed on. The next up on the conversation I have on here that we discussed the mixed use units and what that means. It appears there's a desire to not require the mixed use units, but offer them as an option. That's the way that I'm reading this room at least. However, from what I hear, it appears the APC wishes to have the mixed use units. So the petitioner and the development team need to propose a solution that is agreed upon and satisfactory for everyone at this table. Following that, we moved into the park discussion, talked about the playground. Playground will be required in this ordinance, and the exhibits, the imagery has essentially been approved by everyone here. But then the exhibit will be, the park plan exhibit will be replaced with what was pulled up on the screen there at the very end. And lastly, we talked about a few remaining design language elements for the promenade and the plaza. And I think that covers it. Just went through my outline here. Is there anything that I missed or anything that you want to add, Kevin or Ashley?
Andre, I had a question for you back with the original, the initial topic of the architectural insulated panel being a permitted material for the racket facility. You had indicated that being acceptable if there's a masonry wrap or base of some kind. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, that is what I intended. Yeah.
Agree on that? Do we need to put any sort of height, minimum height?
So Andre,
the
if 8
masonry?
foot could be the minimum, that would be helpful, even though it may be more.
You didn't make reference to 10 feet.
I did, I was just doing math, because I was trying to get to 40-foot clear with the, under a tennis ball. So you really have to have 44 feet, 45 feet, is the thickness of your roof, the rafters and the lights. So I said 10 feet plus 30 to get, or 36 to get there, but it could be 8 foot plus 40 feet,
And I don't have an issue with 8 feet. I'm really just
8
talking,
foot, pretty
you know,
substantial masonry,
Right.
wainscot wall, where.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Could
right.
always
I
be
just want to make sure
smaller.
we didn't set a
Yeah,
minimum.
if we set 8 as a minimum, it could be 12 by the time we're done, just
Yeah.
depends on these panels.
Okay.
If I'm
That-
doing a
that helps.
36-foot panel, I gotta go see how they install them first of all. You don't see an eye hook in these things right off the bat. I mean, you gotta grip it somehow. I gotta figure out, and it's tiny and groove, so it's pretty cool stuff. But if 8 feet's all right with you, Andre, that would be a good minimum.
Yep, I have no issue with 8 feet.
All right. Any other questions from you?
No, I think Wes touched on that. The last, the plaza item, I just had a note to revise the minimum quarter acre requirement so that it does not include, and we'll clean up this language, but so that it does not include perimeter circulation and pathways in that category.
Very important. All right. Because of our very unusual January calendar, we're actually pretty close to our February meeting. There's the rest of this week and one full week, and we're already into
What's the date?
February 6th. Then we go back to a Tuesday meeting for the next workshop meeting in February, which will be on the 21st. How quickly do you think all of this?
Well, we need to get in, I mean, I can't, this thing's been, I'm way out of my construction schedule. You know, delays on closing initially, now this, I'm at a year and a half behind. And I'm burning 23,000 a month right now between lease payments, you know, the dirt I'm not using and interest on money I put in escrow for all the improvements. So I like this, we really need to hit the 6th. Plus the Girth family wants to close. And I have 30 days to close after that, so.
Okay,
I mean,
wondering what
we
we
need to
can
rally
anticipate.
for the 6th, and then when would I be up for the council?
13th, I guess.
13th, okay.
Because they're the second and fourth Mondays, or the first and third, except when there's these holiday crazies.
So with that in mind, we need to hustle and get revisions turned around.
The next few days.
Yeah, ideally by the end of the week, if not the very first of next week. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to probably get our heads together on this mixed use thing and make sure we're all talking the same talk here.
Well, we're available tomorrow, if you want, we can hammer things out.
We've got time to get it hammered out, I think. I think so too.
All right,
All right, well, thank you.
good seeing you. Thanks for all the help.
Well, these workshops are very helpful.
That was our only workshop item for this evening. Other items are continued to future meetings. We have reports and comments.
That's what, I think that's where I got that.
Well, these guys have to go.
Well, yeah, before that.
Thank you all.
Hey,
Your time.
Mr. Horke, we cannot hear you with all the people moving and talking.
But, they just.
We've already signed it. We already signed
I can.
Um,
it. In the room.
Did you make changes again? Okay.
It's run better.
All right. Yeah, I'm happy
You
to.
called me earlier.
All right.
So, okay.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
All right, good night, gentlemen.
Bye.
Is there any general comment from plan commission members for the general interest of the commission? Jenny or Andre? Anything? Are they still there?
No, nothing for me, other than I have to give credit to staff for working on these PUDs because it's like rewriting the whole UDO each time we do one. So thank you for all your hard work.
Absolutely, agreed. All right, is there any downtown update or are we just status quo there?
We're just cruising along, I think, construction drawings.
Okay, council liaison?
Yep, we had a very abbreviated meeting last night. We had one item of old business, which was the interlocal agreement within that, the Mule Barn and 32 interchange. That was tabled because we're waiting for NDOT's attorneys to get back to us with some verbiage changes. And then under new business, there were 3 items. First 2 items were resolutions that had to do with, that we passed here at the APC, cleaning up the TIF areas, the Grand Junction and I think it was Eagletown TIF areas, removing the some residential properties from that. In both of those cases, staff had forgot to attach the exhibits to those. So we put those on hold for the next meeting, tabled also. And then the last thing we had was a discussion regarding the property immediately adjacent to the west of this building is coming up for an auction. And we decided to vote as a council to make a bid to purchase that property. And it would be either added as a city park or possibly in the future used as an extension of the Oak Ridge Road coming north. So we voted to approve that purchase if we're able to do it.
But it's open bidding.
It's open bidding, so I think it's at the end of this week, so we should know. So that's it.
Sign's been up for a while.
Yep.
All right. PZA liaison,
No
there's no meeting. And the PAC committee did not meet either, so nothing there. Community development, any words of wisdom?
I gave all my wisdom already.
Do you have any wisdom?
I've said my piece.
All right.
Thanks, good discussion tonight. Thanks for
Yeah.
helping get this one
And it's only 8:31.
through another meeting. So,
Still an hour and a half, but
we're so close.
I think our time discussion on this project is getting shorter. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second.
I was about to give it to you, Victor.
Oh, thank you.
You okay with a second, Mr. Schmitz?
That's fine.
Okay. We have virtual attendees, so call the roll, if you would, please, staff.
Kristen Berkman,
Yes.
Robert Horgan,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jenny Keller,
Yes.
Andre Maui,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Dave Schmitz.
We are adjourned at 8:31.